And close the eyes. And just allow yourself to arrive in this moment with great awareness. Feel that you have landed softly in the space. And that your faculties are all oriented toward learning, understanding, embodying, and realizing. And draw the hands together in front of the heart. And we'll begin with our invocatory mantras. Take a breath in. Om Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha Hari Om Ganana Antva Ganapati Gum Havamahe Kavin Kavinam Upamashravastamam Jesta Rajam Brahmanan Brahmanaspata anashrin vanuti pisita satanam Mahaganapataye namaha Prano Devi Saraswati Vajebhir Vajinivati Dhinama Vitriyavatu Ano Devo Brahataf Parvata Da Saraswati Ajata Gantu Yagnyam Havan Devi Jujushana Kritachi Shagmando Vacha Mushati Shrinotu Vagdevye Namaha. And gently releasing the hands down and fluttering the eyes open. Good to see you all today. So today I thought we would talk a bit about a few things. But I guess we'll start with our tendency to be reactive versus, say, responsive to life. We had a great conversation yesterday in the Ayurveda workshop. And we talked about how self-care is something that has become a reaction to life. It's not what it's meant to be any longer. I've had a hard day. I better go take some care of myself. I've had a hard year. I better figure out what self-care is. It's very important. You do have to be responsive in that regard. You know that if you're not taking care of yourself, then learning how to take care of yourself. But more than learning how to take care of yourself for the sake of what happened yesterday is learning how to take care of yourself for the sake of what will happen tomorrow, later today, in the next hour. Self-care is meant to be a preventative more than it is a prescription for reactiveness. Self-care is something that we do so that we are more resilient, so that life doesn't impact us so strongly. Self-care is something we do so, as Patanjali puts it in the Yoga Sutras, we are empowered to avoid unnecessary suffering. We're empowered to avoid that suffering which does not need to occur. It's not so we can look back at yesterday and curse yesterday and say, oh, I have to get some tools to recover from that. That's important too, absolutely, because we only know what we know when we know it. We only apply what we apply when we apply it. So there is absolutely always going to be some part of our very human life that we are catching up with, you know. And so we live a traumatic life, and then all of a sudden, you know, we're introduced to tools that are very supportive to us. And of course, our first thought is, I'm going to apply these to the past. I'm going to apply these to the trauma that I carry forward. I'm going to apply these to those habits that I have acquired over time, like not sleeping well enough, not eating well enough. I'm going to apply these to what was. But we can't stop there. We also need to take those self-care behaviors and utilize them now so that we are more resilient now and so that we can avoid suffering in the future that is unnecessary. Does that make sense? But we don't often say that, though. We say, I just need to get past that, whatever that was. We do the same thing spiritually with our sadhana. A lot of the time, a lot of people, they say yoga is the first thing a person will come to, or meditation, the bigger yoga, is the first thing a person will come to when they're suffering, and it's the first thing they'll leave when they feel good. Because goal achieved, check the box. I feel better now. I can sleep a little better at night. Don't really need the yoga anymore. My blood pressure came down. Don't really need the yoga anymore. I feel happy. Just kind of satisfied. Don't really need the yoga anymore. And then we leave it along the wayside until the next crisis. And then the yoga and the meditation and whatever mindfulness practice it happens to be becomes a reactive prescription instead of a preventative. We don't want to live that way. And we don't need to live that way. And the great sages and saints suggest we shouldn't live that way. We should not live life as a reaction. We can embrace our spiritual practices in order to become more resilient so that in reality there is less to react to. Because through that resiliency we acquire the very beautiful gift of clarity, clear-mindedness, clear sight, clearer hearing, clearer use of all of our faculties. We practice our practice, whatever that entails, every single day on the very practical level of it, so that we are more resilient every single day. And we know, if I skip today, if I do nothing today because I woke up this morning, I feel a little lazy, don't really want to sit for an hour, don't really want to sit for 5 minutes, just want to go get that latte. Yeah. Then, what happens is that day we're less resilient. And whatever comes to us through life is going to come to us harder because we didn't practice. And then the next day, what do we say? Yesterday was so hard, I got to recover from that. And our thought and our concern and our intention is not in the resiliency of today, but getting over yesterday. So we just got to switch that up a little bit. We have to switch that up a little bit. And make it so that, yes, our practice is a healing practice. It absolutely is. But we're not only healing from yesterday. We want to empower ourselves to walk toward the future, whatever that happens to be, and to be in this present moment as a more completely healed individual, a more completely healed person. Does it make sense? Yeah. I think somewhere we kind of know that, but it's not what we focus on. We don't talk about it. We just talk about our trauma, what I'm carrying forward from when I was 6 years old, And that's okay. We do have to talk about that. But if that becomes too much of a conversation, then that means that there are other things that we're not talking about. And those other things are our resiliency moment to moment, hour to hour, day to day, year to year, from now moving forward. Our spiritual practices on that practical level, so there's like multiple levels to everything, right? There's the practical level, like what is the day-to-day application of this? And the day-to-day application of your sadhana is to make you a more patient person, a kinder person, a more thoughtful person, a more mindful person, did I say mindful already? A more compassionate person, is to make you a more whole in the moment, is to support that, not make you that, but to support you in seeing your own wholeness as you walk through the world as a human being. The next tier of our spiritual practice is to reveal to you in parts and pieces, and maybe for some in the entirety, the truth of yourself. The truth of yourself, which is not my age, my physical condition, my injuries, my traumas, or any of that. Those are human issues. The truth of myself is not human. The truth of myself is spiritual, is spirit, is consciousness. And while there is a relationship between those two things, the consciousness engulfs the human, but the human cannot engulf the consciousness, because the human is only a very small part of consciousness, very tiny little part of it. So you have to have your human experience. You have to have your traumas, and you have to have your healings and your reflections and whatever else it is that comes along with this body. But you're so much more than that. So don't stop there. Don't allow your spirituality to be reactive to your past or to your humanness. Instead, use your great imagination to support you in remembering. And that's what Advaita Vedanta calls it. They call it the great imagination. They say human beings are endowed with a great, great imagination. And that imagination is spiritually necessary. In the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna is talking to Krishna, and he's getting the idea that Krishna is not just his cousin or his friend, that he's something else, but he can't imagine what. So he starts asking, he says, why are you talking about like eons ago, as if you were there? Like, why? How can you possibly know that? You talk about these things as if they happened yesterday. I don't remember any of them, but you say we. And Krishna tells him, he says, well, you just don't remember. You don't recall because you're locked into the container of this human life right now. He said, but I am beyond this human life. And so through conversation, Arjuna says to him, well, I get it, sort of, kind of. You know, you're not exactly what I think you are. You're something much more than that. Can you show me what you are? Can you show me? I'm ready. Show it to me. And, you know, I can just kind of imagine. I use my great imagination. I can imagine Krishna kind of being like, okay, here goes. You ready? Really? All right. This is the truth. And forward comes Krishna's effulgent self. And Arjuna, of course, trembles in fear. He trembles in fear. You know, imagine, bows down. He says, you're so much more than I could have even imagined. Never mind what I did imagine. But I can't relate to you like this. So can you please come back to a form that I'm familiar with, something that I can relate to? And so Krishna, in his great compassion, does. He returns to the embodied self that Arjuna knows and loves, and they continue their conversation. For you and I, it's like that too. We talk about spirituality and our spiritual self. And we have a little imagination that we encounter, a little bit. I imagine spirituality as being easy. You don't get to check that box because that's not true. I imagine spirituality as being sparkly and with unicorns. I imagine spirituality being reciting Rumi all the time. I imagine spirituality being this concept of oneness and unity, and everybody is happy, satisfied, happy. These are little tiny imaginations, which are really just a calling from your innermost self to remember something even more than that. Because truly, in your human form, spirituality can be whatever you want it to be. So if you want it to be sparkles and unicorns, so it shall be, right? If you want it to be selective oneness, so it shall be. But if you use your great imagination, then what you'll find is that your spiritual self is effulgence, is exactly as Krishna, coming forward in that bright light, that beautiful unity where there is no reaction. There's only presence and being. And so that's like the uppermost tier to this inquiry of our own spirituality. But we will never achieve that remembrance, that level of engagement or being, if we're only utilizing our spirituality, our spiritual practices, our life practices as a reactive mechanism to address the past. Only when we have worked through what needs to be worked through in a sincere and honest way do we empower ourselves to step up one more step now and begin to embrace these practices as a resiliency. Let me build the resiliency within myself to be present to this life, to be present to whatever comes to me. Remember at the end of the class, those of you in class, we did the Abhaya and Varada Mudra. So the Varada Mudra is the mudra of boons. Boons are like gifts, right? So when you see the goddess, well, she doesn't have the mudras there, but when you see the goddess, typically she'll be like this with two of her many arms. And this is her giving boons. And Shiva, or any of the gods, giving boons, giving gifts to the devotees. And this is Abhaya Mudra. And Abhaya Mudra is fearlessness, courage, bravery. For us, when we take this, yes, there is a service, there is a giving, there is a generosity associated with Varada Mudra, but there's also a receiving. There's something that comes to us. And what comes to us is whatever comes to us. So may I receive whatever comes to me. And may I give everything that I have fearlessly. May I give and receive fearlessly. And while there is a part of ourself, there is a time that we do have to dedicate addressing the traumas of the past. We will not learn how to give and receive everything fearlessly now or in the future if that is the only place we remain concerned with. So we need to build the resiliency, heal the past to whatever degree we can, but in a time frame that is not this entire life, if that makes sense. So taking the time and looking honestly and earnestly, how much of my past am I truly working to heal? And how much of it am I claiming I'm working to heal, but actually using as a crutch? Actually using as an excuse? How much of the past am I truly honoring? And how much of it am I carrying forward as the story that I'm sticking with? And it might not be that I'm sticking with my trauma-injured self as my story, but maybe I'm sticking with my healed warrior self as the story. I'm healed from my past, my past, my past, my past, my past, my past. What are you doing with your healed self in the present, besides talking about the past? And how are you allowing that healed warrior self to propel you toward remembrance of the effulgent self? Because that is the whole point of all of this. I'm not suggesting that you no longer talk about your past. There is a place that you need to do that. I need to do that. There is a place where we need to do that. What I am suggesting is that you stop gossiping about it. What is gossip? Idle chatter. Don't idle chatter about the past. If you're doing the work of the past, then be engaged in the work of the past. with your counselor, with your guide, with whatever it happens to be, with you, if you're working through a text or something like that, then be present to it then. But when the page closes, and when the door closes, and you leave your session, when that part of the work is done, then that's where the past belongs. Then you walk through that door from the past into the present. And you take what you've learned and you apply it to your present moment. Because what good are this is so interesting because this is not exactly where I was going to take this, but okay. So what good are the lessons of the past if you're not applying them now? They don't matter. Who cares if you're a warrior? I got over my past, but I let you all walk over me today. I'm not so much a warrior. There's an ignorance there. When we think that way, when we live that way, when we don't apply the lessons of the past to this present moment, there's an ignorance there that we have to overcome if we ever wish to know the effulgence of the true self. So not only do we need to take an inventory of the past and what it is that we do actually need to heal from, but we also need to take an inventory of kind of our present day life scenario and recognize where we're genuinely living in this present moment and where we're hiding, where we're living in this present moment and where we're actually not living. We're reliving the past. And then we need to take yet another inventory of how we move forward. And I know like the catchphrases in spirituality in the American West, I've learned to say American West because I have so many Western friends from other countries and they're like, don't lump us in there. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. And they're like, it's very American of you. So now I say American West. In the American West, we say, be in this present moment. Don't think about the future and don't think about the past. But all we do is think about the past and we shun the future. But the reality is that you do need some idea of moving forward. You do need some idea of what you'll do tomorrow, next week, next year, and beyond that. Some idea. You don't need to be hyper-focused on it. But if you don't have some idea of an intention, where to be a year from now, flexibly, of course, is that the right word? With flexibility, of course, because you just don't know what's going to happen between now and then. But if you don't have something that you're looking forward to, then you will only look back. So we say, in this life, I've made the resolution myself personally. In this life, I've made the resolution for self-realization. That's what I'm working toward. And am I there? No. Sometimes maybe, I don't know. Yeah, maybe little moments here and there. But I'm working toward that. I'm dedicating my behaviors, my thoughts, my actions, my teaching, my learning. I'm dedicating everything toward that. And with the grace of divinity, it'll happen in this life. Or it'll happen 100,000 lives from now. There's nothing I can do about that. All I can do is dedicate myself now so that the rest of my life sets the platform up for that. Whether my life lasts for 10 more seconds, 10 more minutes, 10 more hours, 10 more years, or 110 more years. Every moment of whatever time there is left will be lived to that intention. And in that intention, I will have a space that I hold in honor of my past. Because my past is what got me to today, so I do need to honor that. And there are still injuries from my past that need to be addressed, and so I will address them, but they won't become my crutch. I'm not going to sit there and use them as my overcoat. They're not that immense. They're not that important. And why aren't they that important? Why aren't they as important as say, they don't carry the same amount of importance that in the past I used to give them? I used to give my traumas a lot of importance in the past. Because I recognize now that they're no longer happening. They're no longer happening. So they're no longer real in the context of what is happening right now. And whatever echo of those things are coming forward in my life today, I meet them with my practice. I meet them with my meditation. I meet them with mantra. I meet them with sadhana of whatever type I'm practicing. That's what I meet. I meet the tendencies. I meet the impressions that are still going through my physical body and my mental mind and emotional self with my sadhana, with the intention of reconciliation, resolution, and remembrance. 3 R's. Reconciliation, remembrance. What was the first one?
Resolution.
What was that?
Resolution.
Resolution. So, 3 important words. To have resolution, to reconcile what can be reconciled. And when something is reconciled, so let me ask you this. You're making a pot of soup, and you put salt in your soup. The salt reconciles itself to the water, does it not? Can you go back in now and pull the salt back out? It's futile, in the words of the Borg, right? For those Star Trek people in the room. That would be a futile effort, would it not? So life is like that. Once something is reconciled, it no longer needs to be addressed. We reconcile so much on a day-to-day basis, but then we pull it back out again. We say, give me the salt. Where is it? I got to pull it out. And we pull it out in another form. We take the broth of the soup and we say, this is the salt of the past. But it's not anymore because something has been reconciled and you don't need to carry it with you anymore. Once it has been reconciled, put it away and bring your energy to something else. Bring your energy forward with you so that every moment of your life, every breath you take, you're taking yourself closer and closer into the present moment. Does that make sense? I'll pause there and say any reflections or questions. I like your smile, Jagadathri. I think there's a lot of reflections behind that smile.
There's a lot of internal reflection thank you.
I'm remembering that, I don't know, I can't remember the words of the Marianne Williamson saying about how we don't fear our, whatever, our weaknesses or whatever. What we fear is our brilliance.
Yeah. I think Anais Nin has a poem. Is it Anais? I'm pretty sure it's Anais Nin. She says, the bud remained so tightly closed, the rosebud stayed so tightly closed until it was too painful to remain closed, and then she opened. And that's like us. So I think it's similar to that, right? So that's like us. We remain so tightly closed. What are we closed in? We're closed in the covering of the past. We're so tightly closed. And at some point in time, if you dedicate yourself to your practice, to your sadhana, if you dedicate yourself to a life intention of remembrance of the self, eventually you will outgrow that covering. It will become uncomfortable and painful to remain in that place, and you'll open, and that coat will fall away. And then you'll potentially have another coat, and you'll outgrow that one too. And then another one, and another one. Because we're just full of coats, we're full of coverings. We really are. But that's our humanness, and that's a beautiful thing. That's not a bad thing. None of this is bad. It's just saying we have all of these choices. We have the choice. We can look at that sky out there. Look at that sky. Isn't she beautiful? So number one, we can look at that sky and we can say she's beautiful. We can also look at that sky and say she's actually full of pollution. She might be blue a little bit today, but she's actually full of pollution. We can also look at that sky and say, well, that sky is ruined by the clouds. We can look at that sky and say, she's blue. She's like this powder blue. We can look at that sky and say, she's baby blue. We can look at that sky and say, well, she's some other color blue. There's so many different ways to look at something. But most time we pick only one. And when we pick only one way to see things, we say no to everything else. And we lose the potential that all those other things can bring to us. In this regard, when we look at the past and we say the past is one thing and one thing only, it is what is defining me in this moment. It is what I'm reliving in this moment, and it is what's guiding my life. It's who I am. Then what we're effectively saying is no to remembering who we actually are. Yeah. We have to do the work. It's all about the work. But once we resolve ourselves to do the work, then we reconcile the past, and then we leave it alone. We leave it alone, unless it comes up again. And if it comes up, if you have a trigger or something like that, and the trigger comes, then you address the trigger. Just leave the past in the past. You address the trigger until the trigger is reconciled. And then you continue until the next trigger comes, and then you reconcile that. Do the work, do the work, do the work. And through that process, you acquire such great clarity, that you begin to see yourself more clearly, more fully, and more honestly. Right now, not many people see themselves very honestly. They see who they are afraid of being, they see who they want to be, they see who they have been, and they see what everybody else tells them they should be. Rarely do we see who we actually are. So through clarity, we begin to see who we are. And who we are, really, truly who we are. And then that light comes out. It's like Krishna's light. That light comes out. And inevitably, the people around us, maybe it's just a little bit of the light that comes out. Those of you who have taken a teacher training will probably remember this. A little bit of that light starts coming out. Inevitably, the people around us who are not invested in the same type of work will say, whoa, that light's too bright. Would you put it away and come back to something I can relate to, please? And then, we go to our spiritual teacher and we say, why can't they just accept that I'm doing this? Should I stop doing this? It's like, no, you shouldn't stop doing this. You want to stop doing this and go to be a form that they understand you as. Isn't that where the suffering is? Trying to be what they want you to be. Trying to fill their expectations and not remember your truth. Isn't that where the suffering is? Yeah. I want to share 2 quotes with you. This is Eknath Easwaran's book, Words to Live By, and these are short readings of daily wisdom. And these 2 readings, one comes from the Katha Upanishad, and the other, they both come from the Katha Upanishad. Look at that. It's such a good Upanishad. They're all good Upanishads. The joy of the spirit ever abides, but not what seems pleasant to the senses. Both these, differing in their purpose, prompt us to action. So the joy of the spirit is going to prompt us to be resolute, to reconcile what can be reconciled, and to remember the truth of ourselves. The sensory impressions of pleasure and pain are going to prompt us to remain bound by the past, by our fears, by even our hopes, by our passions, by our dullnesses, by everything in that realm. So we're constantly being pulled in these 2 different directions. To listen to the calling of the spirit, or to be bound by what we can say is the calling of the ego. The Upanishad goes on to say As pure water poured into pure water becomes the very same, so does the self of the illumined man or woman verily become one with the Godhead. The more you practice and know that you are practicing not for the past, and really also not for the future, but for the remembrance, the more you will remember and the less you will be bound. Make sense? Yeah. Check. Ooh. Questions or reflections?
I remember when I was reconciling a lot of things that had happened to me and working through that process, which is beautiful and, as you say, necessary. And I remember getting to a point where it was time to for it to allow it to let go of me, right? It was time to step forward into remembrance. And probably the hardest battle in all of it was that moment, because I thought to myself, I remember very distinctly, who will I be without this pain? Who will I be without this past? And of course, I didn't know the answer at the time. The answer is I will be who I am.
Mm-hmm.
But as you say, it takes courage. It's not easy.
Yeah.
I just remembered that when you were speaking.
It's beautiful. Imagine a little snake. You know how snakes grow and outgrow their skin? Imagine a little snake, he sheds his first little skin. And now he's moving forward as his own self, whatever that means in the moment. But he turns around and he says, "Ooh, I better carry that skin with me. Because that's what I'm used to. That's what I'm accustomed to." So he carries a little skin with him. Just imagine he's got some little armor or something, I don't know. He's carrying that little skin with him. And he comes across another snake, and the other snake says, "What is that?" He says, "Oh, it's who I used to be." And he said, "Well, why are you still carrying it?" And, "Well, because it's familiar to me, and I don't know, I don't want to leave it behind. I'm not sure what happens if I leave it behind." He said, "Well, you have no choice but to leave it behind. It's not part of you anymore. So just let it go, drop it off." Like the cicada bug, right? The cicada bug too. The shell opens up and the new self emerges, and it leaves the old self, which is a really cool exoskeleton, sitting on a little branch, for us to discover, right? And what do we say? What do we say when we see the cocoon that has been opened? Or we see the little exoskeleton, if you're like me and really into bugs. We look at that and we say, "Oh my gosh, that's so cool. That means that they're in the next stage. That's so amazing. Look at that caterpillar spinning the cocoon. It's going into the next stage." We see the cocoon open. "Oh my gosh, that means there's a butterfly here somewhere." We look at ourselves and say, "Stop. Not going there. Not breaking out of the sheath. Nope. Staying in the sheath. Nope." And then we get a little view, a little inkling that we have grown, and we turn around and run back. We turn around and run back to what we think is familiar. But use your great imagination. So coming back around to that again. Use your great imagination and imagine yourself free. Free from unnecessary suffering. Free from the past. Free from the identifications. Free from the bondage of the senses. The senses, not that you can't enjoy the senses. You're meant to enjoy the senses, otherwise you wouldn't have them. But free from the bondage of that. From expecting everything to be a certain way. Imagine yourself resilient so that you do meet life exactly as it approaches you. And instead of meeting it with fear and angst or, passionate attachment, meet it with patience and faith and grace as a witness. Not as the one who's going to be the lion tamer, and not as the one who's going to be the lion, but as the one who's just going to be. Be resilient enough to be the responder, not the reactor. Imagine yourself that way. You've imagined yourself the other way long enough, don't you think? I'm 60 this year. I love saying that. I'm going to be 60 this year. And for a lot of those 60 years, I imagined myself a certain way. And do I still? Of course. Till the day we die in this body, we'll imagine ourselves a certain way. But my imaginings are different now than what they used to be. I used to imagine myself to be a great rebel, an anti-establishmentarianist. I used to imagine myself to be a feminist. Still am a feminist. I used to imagine myself to be a lot of different things. But those are fleeting for the most part. Because eventually you come to understand that what is it to be a feminist is to label myself. What is it that I am actually trying to attain or accomplish through that label? Is the reconciliation of the imbalance of value of life. That some people are looked at with greater value based on their sex or their gender or their age. We want to reconcile that so that we look at everyone with love, with peace, with respect, with honor. We look at everyone and say, value across the board. No one has less value than another. So if that makes me a feminist, yay. But what I think it makes me is a human practicing their humanity. But yes, I still do use the label feminist, just to be clear. So imagine yourself. Use your great imagination to break free perhaps of some of the labels that you apply that are limiting. Look at the label that you're applying to yourself and say, what does this label actually mean to me? What is it that I'm trying to accomplish through this? And then, instead of depending upon the label to do the work for you, put the label away a little bit and do the work. Because what is it to be a feminist if I treat you all differently? What is it to be a humanitarian if I see one of you as having more value than another and I treat you that way? What is it to be a compassionate person if I'm cruel, if I'm hurtful, if I have ill will towards you, if I talk behind your back, if I make accusations behind your back that I'm not going to come say to your face or talk to you about? Do you see? That's a conflict. And it's a conflict that brings forward the glue that sticks me to my past. Because those types of behaviors, the ill will and all the other karmas that we talked about yesterday in the Ayurveda, right? All of these ill will, anger, cruelty, gossip, slander, harsh words, accusations, these are all habitual behaviors that we're carrying forward with us from a time preceding now. So put them away. Let them be in the past, and let them go someplace with the past that doesn't exist any longer. And instead be present now in a more profound condition, a condition that chooses the opposites of those behaviors. Choose love. Choose kindness. Choose peace. Choose, it's none of my business what you think of me. Choose, it's none of my business what you're saying. Choose something else. Broaden your horizons. Find out how to become more resilient. The reed, like a long piece of grass, the reed is so resilient because it bends to the wind with no complaint. It just keeps bending to the wind. But a great oak tree can snap and break on a breeze, especially once it has lost its resiliency. And its resiliency is its ability to be flexible, to receive everything that comes, to give away everything, and to do so fearlessly. Remember the big old tree out back? What are they called again? They're not cedars. What are they? No, the big cedar looking like tree in the back. There used to be two of them when we first came here.
Cypress?
Are they cypress? Maybe they're cypresses.
Sure.
Well, over by the meditation path, we have these two huge evergreen-ish trees. And they were sisters. There were two of them. And what ended up happening was one of them died. Like it went dormant. And about 2 years later, we had a windstorm. And it wasn't even the strongest wind. And it cracked in half and fell into the parking lot. It was a big tree. A lot of the mulch that you see around the property is that tree. So even something big and powerful can break so easily. So don't be like that. Don't try to be big and powerful. Be like the reed of grass. Flexible, bendable, allowable, resilient. We still have a couple minutes left. Let me read to you what Eknatheshwaran said, because this is just so beautiful. When we let the senses follow their own lead, they cannot help but go after pleasure, and sometimes they go after pain also. That is their nature. As a result, it should come as no surprise to see that most of the world today is on the road to sensory satisfaction. It takes real toughness and a lot of practice to wait out all of the blandishments of passing pleasures when they lead us away from our real goal. When we lack this toughness, despite better goals we may cherish in our heart, we will not be able to take the road that leads where we want to go. It is a poignant paradox, wanting only happiness, yet going systematically in the other direction. But if we keep choosing the joy of the Spirit, I can assure you, we will reach our goal. Now, mind you, I was thinking about this talk. It was inspired from our Ayurveda workshop yesterday. I was thinking about this talk, and I thought to myself, just before class, there's got to be, let me think real quick. There's got to be something in the Gita I can refer to, because I always like to refer back to the scriptures so that there's an authenticity to what I'm saying. So I walked into the library looking for Eknatheshwaran's Bhagavad Gita, and instead I came across this one, and I thought, I'm never going to find something in here. It's just too thick of a book, and I had like a minute to walk down the hall, So I opened it, and I opened it to page 246, what I just read to you, and I thought, oh, okay, fine. Thanks, Ma. Absolute perfection. Absolute perfection. All right, so takeaways from today's talk. Do the work of the past, but don't live there. Understand that living there is the sand trap that many are caught in right now. So do the work of doing the work of the past only and not living there. Second takeaway from today. Understand that we have a tendency to be reactive in our self-care, in our spiritual practices, in the way we look at life. We have a tendency to react only after it's happened. But what we actually want to do is orient ourselves so that our practice becomes what we could call preventative. It's going to prevent any future unnecessary suffering, and in the same moment, support us in opening up to the truth of ourselves. Learn about the resolution that you have for this life. What is your resolution? Do you even have one? Well, I have a resolution. I want to quit smoking by next year. I want to stop cursing in front of my kid, whatever. But what's your life resolution? Cultivate a life resolution. And then utilize your sadhana and whatever has been reconciled from the past to support that life resolution. And you're not talking about a life resolution as if it's something you're looking for 20 years from now. Because your life may only last 20 more seconds. You don't know. So what does that mean? That means that you need to put it into play now. Now. So that whenever your life ends, your final thought will not be, damn, I should have done that sooner. Your final thought will be, this is who I truly am. Peace. And I'm sure there's a few other takeaways, but I'll leave them to you to decipher. All right, last call, Q&A. Any questions, reflections? We're good? Yes.
So, think about, thank you, number one. Thank you so much for sharing with us.
You're welcome.
Thank you, everyone. It's good to be with you all. So say that I'm going to cross a creek of flowing water, and there's a stick or a log across the creek. And one time, I went to cross the creek and I slipped and fell in the water and got totally wet.
Yeah.
Then I'm coming again and I need to cross the creek and there's maybe a different log there today. Now I could freak out and run away. I could let that fear of the past take over and get kind of super scared and hesitant, and that could cause me maybe to fall more easily. Or I could harvest my lesson. Oh, last time the place I stepped, there was a little moss and it was a wet spot. I can't step on any wet spots on the log. And that integration helps me then be fearless as I learn to cross the log again.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, and then I make it to the other side. And then as I keep integrating my lessons or my experiences, and harvest that seed of the lesson and keep that in my heart, not the shaft, the pain of the wetness and the fear of the wetness, but harvest that seed of the lesson and carry that in my heart. And in that way, I can become more and more fearless. And I'm aware that sometimes I come up against, like, often if I'm starting a new relationship and I need to open my heart and my heart's been hurt in the past, it's difficult sometimes. I'm once bitten, twice shy. I might speak from that place of my insecurity, and I find that it's often then adds to that type of energy by speaking it. And so I'm just really working on integrating my past experiences, but then just harvesting that lesson and then taking that with me and then being in the present moment, applying the wisdom. And in that way I can cross the creek with all kinds of different logs and sticks. And then eventually I really like that idea of forgive and forget, but I probably won't even remember after many times of crossing many streams that I felt one time.
Absolutely. It's a great story, so thank you. Yeah.
Well, it was your teachings that I was just yes, the get it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's skill. So Krishna also, he defines yoga many, many different times in the Bhagavad Gita. And in the Gita, and the Devi says this in the Devi Mahatmya also, it says, yoga is skill in action. Yoga is mastery. Mastery of what? The mind. But not only of the mind. It's also mastery of the body. And it's not mastery of the body as in indulgence and doing what you want to do. It's mastery of the body in utilizing the body in ways that are supportive of clearing and clarifying the koshas or the sheaths of our existence. So I don't use this body in exploitative ways because I know that that increases unnecessary suffering. But I use this body in ways that I hope build skill. You know, the first time I sat down to do needlepoint, I was so inspired. My grandmother used to do needlepoint. It's so pretty. Like the back of it looked just as nice as the front of it. You all know what I'm about to say, right? Yeah, those of you who have tried needlepoint. Yeah. So I sat down to try it. I don't know. I was like 8, 9 years old or something. I sat down to try it, and she's like, you just have to do it this way. And I did, and the front of it looked pretty bad. But the back of it looked horrible. It looked like this tangle of knots and everything else, you know. Skill in needlepoint is when the back looks the same as the front. You know, skill. But that takes time and effort and intention. And so Patanjali speaks to that, Krishna speaks to that, the Devi Mother speaks to that. He says, your spiritual sadhana, your practice grows if you apply the practice, if you apply yourself to it. A practice over a long period of time with great enthusiasm, little to no interruption, builds skill in your practice. And skill in your practice eventually becomes parasadhana, the great practice. The great practice. And what is the great practice? Mastery. Mastery of your humanness, mastery of yourself on all levels, all 3 worlds, all 5 sheaths, all 7 chakras, however you want to define yourself. Mastery of that. Then you look at the log and you say, cross the log. Nishala Joy Devi, one of my beautiful teachers in the past, such a lovely being, so bright and light. If you ever have a chance to study with her, I strongly advise it. She's just wonderful. She was a disciple of Swami Satchidananda at Yogaville for many years, and she was actually a Swami under his tutelage. And she tells this story that they would be walking across the property where the ashram is now, Yogaville. And as they're walking, there's a whole group of them, and one of the devotees said, Swamiji, I have to ask this question. And he said, what question? And they said, well, when you walk, the grass beneath you doesn't bend like it does when we walk. Like when we walk and then we take the next step, the grass that we leave behind is bent over. It's crinked because of the weight of our footstep. But you walk and the grass, when you take your next step, is upright. What's that all about? Skill. Mastery. Mastery over the physical body. You're not as heavy as you think you are. You don't have to stomp your feet. You're not as much of whatever it is that you think you are, you know? And even if you think you're great, you're not as much of that either, right? Because whatever you think of yourself is your ego telling you you're bad, you're good, you're great, you're not valuable. It's all your ego. So you're nowhere near that. You're something else entirely. And so his response to them was mastery. Mastery in walking and mastery of devotion. Because when you walk upon the earth, what are you walking on? Dirt and grass? No. What are you walking on? Yeah. You're walking, number 1, upon the mother, and number 2, upon your very own self. So lighter steps, please. Lighter steps. Clarity and skill. Then you can cross any stick. Then you can maybe even walk on water like Christ.
It's a beautiful analogy. Thank you for sharing that. I was thinking about how you were talking about we have fear of the past and we hold on to it and then we're not living. And I think about that analogy, like the first thing I thought was like, well, what's so wrong with getting wet, right? But if we approach something, right, if we approach being with like a preference or this is the outcome I want, and if we're approaching life that way, then when we fall or get wet, it's now a bad thing, and now then we add fear to that, right? Because it's like, well, I can't have that happen again. But how much of all of that then is just from preference and attachment to an outcome, where if we were just going to be, whether we're wet, dry, up, down, it's all the same, really.
I sail over oceans. You can't have that mentality. Fly paragliders. Whatever. It's not good. It's not. Let's see. But like in my life, my mastery, I'm way more aiming.
You have to.
I'm very conscious about what I'm going for, and I'm fine with what isn't. I'll like consume like a fire, the fear, and turn it into fuel for the fire of my focus.
Yeah.
And I'm fine with whatever's happening, but if I was carrying a baby, I can't fall in the river.
Of course.
You know, there's times where I can be fine with it if it happens, but you know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
I do have attachment to not getting the baby wet and cold in the winter, so I can't.
But there's also different levels that we're talking about here, because everything has levels. So you're in what you're saying, which is very correct.
When the baby's
I know.
Involved, when the heart's involved, and I'm not just going to do whatevs, sister.
And that's perfectly fine. You're talking about the human application. The human application. And yes, you do have that responsibility. And yes, you are safeguarding. So yes, but you're talking about on this other level, this next kind of level of it really is all the same. Because if you're meant to fall, you're going to.
Yeah, it's so true.
The mastery moves beyond the ability to walk on water or walk over a log. The mastery moves into the realm of acceptance.
Oh, Creator,
yeah. Sorry to give you something else to think about now.
Thank you.
Yeah. The mastery moves into the realm of acceptance. Accepting. And most times when you walk across a log and you fall, it's because you were afraid of falling. When I was younger, I wasn't allowed to play with sharp things because inevitably I would cut myself. And so I have this beautiful little scar right here where I got something like, 18 or 30 stitches or something, because I was putting together hibachi. My husband and I were early on married, putting together a hibachi, and he's watching me do this, and he goes, "We told you you shouldn't be doing that. You're going to hurt yourself." And I'm like, no, I'll be fine. Shh. Wasn't fine, had to go to the hospital, get all these stitches and everything like that. But it's mindset, right? Like if you tell yourself it's going to happen, if you're afraid of it, it's going to happen, right? So how many times have you seen something happen, seen yourself, with a paper cut or stub your toe, and you were like, I knew that was going to happen, right? You were afraid that was going to happen. And so that contributed to it happening. So the mastery of acceptance is saying, I will apply my skill, but the outcome is not my control. And Krishna Bhagavad Gita, Devi Mahatmya, Patanjali, it all says this too. It says, Krishna tells Arjuna very specifically, he says, the problem is that you think you're the doer. You think that you're the controller of the outcome. If you want to come to me, be skillful in your action and let go of the result. And letting go of the result is the acceptance that you're talking about. And the skill is what you're talking about. But then there's the attachment to the outcome, which is very human and normal. And you in our day-to-day life, you do have responsibilities in this world, this very human-made world. They're called human-made responsibilities, right? And maybe some even have legal repercussions to them. So we're navigating this all the time. We're going back and forth between, the eloquence of surrender and acceptance and the gross existence of our humanness. Navigating these two very different realms that meet somewhere in the middle. When do we become, the spiritual being who simply takes right action and lets go of the outcome because it was never under our control to begin with? Yeah. Okay. How are you feeling? Good. And how are you both feeling?
Good.
Good.
Thank you.
And how are you feeling?
Great.
And how are you?
Good.
And how are you? And how are you? And Amber, how are you, dear? Very good. All right. Let's sit up nice and tall. Close the eyes. Take a nice breath in and a nice breath out. Draw the hands together in front of the heart. Beloved Mother, empower us to be masterful in this life. Masterful with each action, that each action should be an offering to you. Each breath, each blink of the eyes, each step we take, every action, an offering to you. And provide us the courage and the bravery to accept that the outcome is out of our control. Let the outcome also be an offering to you. Allow us to abide. Lifting our voices in one Om. Om Shri Matre Namaha. Thank you all so much for being here today. It's such a blessing to gather with you all and have this wonderful conversation. Thank you. Woo! Enjoy your brunch. If you haven't eaten yet and you're going down to eat, please show everyone in the kitchen some love. They're down there serving for you. And as a reminder now, next week, timings change. So Sundays, because of responsibilities that I have to fulfill at this point, self-guided meditation will start at 9, Yin will start at 10, Wisdom Circle will start at 11:30. So everything will be an hour later. And I apologize for that if it creates any obstacles for anyone, but it can't be helped right now. So. And that'll be the new times going forward. And Casey's going to send the newsletter out. It'll have the proper times on them. So, very good. Thank you all so much. Be well.